Black Stone Goblins driven off, Baridoc Kingston organizes a pursuit to remove the goblin threat permanently. The pursuit is slow. The fighting wounded take time to patch up. The force advances cautiously, wary of goblin trickery. And dwarves, while tenacious, are less swift of foot than the goblins they pursue. As Baridoc reaches the goblin camp, it has been swiftly broken down as the tribe begins to move onward. Gralk forms up a rear guard to delay the dwarves while the women and children escape. Between Baridoc and his vengeance lies Stoney Creek. Engorged by the spring melt, this normally minor inconvenience has become a major obstacle. The forces of the dwarves remain pretty consistent. We've got Baridoc Kingston with the heroic trait Shield Wall, leading the Hammerheart Oathsworn. Forgrin Shield Splitter has earned enough experience to gain the Hold the Line heroic trait, and he's leading the Spears of South Pass. We have Thattic, the level 2 spellcaster. He'll have Brace and Stoneheart. We have the Stout Hearts, the Dwarf Archers. They have earned enough experience to now have a battle honour. We have Edmund the Ox with the heroic trait Stand Your Ground, leading Edmund's lads. And we have the Goldenfield Bowmen. The goblins are once again led by Gralk, leading his bodyguard of goblin soldiers. He has the heroic ability Turn the Line. We have Char, the level 2 goblin spellcaster, who has Fireball and Courage. Russ, the goblin captain, is leading his bodyguard of goblin spearmen. Stirred, the champion, is leading goblin soldiers. We have another unit of 10 goblin soldiers, 10 goblin archers, and then 3 ogre linebreakers. The scenario today will be the Bridge the River scenario from the rulebook itself, with just a little bit of a change. There'll only be 2 crossing points because I'm playing on a 4-foot by 4-foot board. Additionally, the bridge at Stoney Creek is quite small. It's not a massive monolith, so it will be difficult terrain to get a whole unit across. Apart from that, we have Gralk deployed on his left flank here with the ogres, and Char looking to get up on the hill with the goblin archers. And we have Stirred and Bruss looking to move forward and hold the ford. On the dwarf side, on the left flank we have Forgrin, who will be leading the Spears of South Pass towards the ford, and we have Baridoc and Edmund on the right moving up towards the bridge with the archers nice and safe in the centre. We'll see. Leading off as ever with an initiative roll. Blue for the dwarves and ivory for the goblins. And the dwarves get it with a 9. Thattic begins by turning on the spot, wiggling his fingers and chanting words of arcane power. He casts Brace onto the Hammerheart Oathsworn. Char looks up, spots an omen. Birds of prey are circling overhead, foretelling victory this day. Gralk's bodyguard are emboldened and gain courage. The Goldenfields bowmen rush up and launch a volley of arrows across the river into Stirred's blocking force, cutting down 2 goblins. Meanwhile, the goblin archers bicker and fight amongst themselves. The officer has to knock a few heads together just to get them to the top of the hill. So at the end of the turn, both sides have moved up, the goblin advance force has moved onto the bridge, and the goblin right flank has taken some light casualties. Let's start turn 2 with an initiative roll. We have 8 going to the goblins, but a double 3. Double 3s is the bad food result. Bruss and his spear goblins are all of a sudden overtaken by horrible pains in their bellies. Their knees go weak and they fold over in agony. The garrison of Stoney Creek Burr they ate the night before are having their revenge. Bruss and his bodyguard now have -2 to their activation for the rest of the game. And this is where I regret not putting bad food onto Char. We'll see what happens. 3 dice, then 6s to activate. He succeeds with a 7. Char will be moving 6 inches up the hill, which allows him to draw a line of sight over the Stouthearts to Thazak, where he will be casting Fireball. Rot roll. He requires 7s on 2 dice, and he successfully casts the spell with a 7. Thazak has shielding, so it's down to 2 combat dice at shoot 4. Shoot 4 on defense 9 means he requires 5s. Whew, thankfully, there are no wounds there. On the Dwarves' turn, we'll activate Thazak. 2 dice, needing 4s. He fails to activate, too busy dodging that fireball. In that case, he's just going to move up to 5 inches straight forward. The goblins will attempt to activate Stirred and his meat shield, goblin soldiers. 3 dice, needing 6s. They fail their activation with a 5, so that buggers things up a little bit. That's alright. They will just move 6 inches forward to the bank of the river. The Stouthearts are the next to activate. 3 dice have been in range of Baridoc, needing 4s. They succeed with 4s. And they will be taking shots at their closest target, which are the goblin soldiers on the bridge. The goblin soldiers will receive cover from the sides of the bridge. So the Stouthearts will receive 4 dice because the goblins have shielding. They are shoot 2, +1 for having an extra rank, but -1 because the target has cover. So shoot 2 on defense 9, they'll require 7s. We have 1, 2, 3 there. Ooh, good shooting. The goblins will be required to make a morale check. 2 dice, -3 for casualties, but +1 for it being a shooting attack, so they'll require 8s on 2 dice. They fail, so they become disordered. Realising that panic is beginning to set in, Grellick activates, successfully on a 9, and advances towards the goblins on the bridge in order to remind them who's in charge and who tells them when to run away. Reuben Willis of the Goldenfields Bowmen senses blood in the water and orders his archers to shoot at the panicking goblins on the bridge. Activating, 2 dice and 5s, he succeeds with 10s. The goblins on the bridge are their closest target at 12.5 inches. The ones at the ford are 13.5 inches away. So they'll get 4 dice. They are shoot 2, +1 for having an extra rank, but -1 because the target has cover. So shoot 2 on defense 9, they'll require 7s. There is a single 9 there. That'll do the job. And the goblins must now make a morale check. They'll get 3 dice because Grellick has moved up. They'll receive -1 for casualties, -1 for being disordered, but +1 for it being a shooting attack. So they're going to require 7s on 3 dice. They succeed with a 7, and, well, that one's cocked, a 7. So Grellick manages to keep those unruly goblins in line. The Goblin Arches will be the next to activate. 3 dice for being in range of Bruss. They will need 6s. They succeed with a 6. So they will be shooting at their closest target. A volley of arrows heading towards the Spears of South Pass. The goblins are shoot 1, +1 for having an extra rank, giving them shoot 2 on defense 10, so they will require 8s. They'll get 4 dice because dwarven spears have shields. There are 2 8s there, so 2 of the dwarves go down, and the dwarves will need to make a morale check. They'll get 2 dice, -2 for casualties, +1 for it being a shooting attack, and +1 for having more than 2 ranks. So they'll need 4s on 2 dice. They succeed with 7s. The Spears of South Pass will be the next to activate. 2 dice needing 4s. They succeed with a 7, and they will continue advancing under a hail of goblin arrows. 5 inches for their first move, and then their second move will bring them in contact with the ford, where they are forced to stop. On the goblin turn, they will attempt to rally the disordered soldiers. 3 dice for being within range of Grelk, -1 for being disordered, means they will require 7s. They succeed with a 10, so they are no longer disordered. They are safe where they are at the moment, just outside of charge range, so they're going to end their activation just by waiting there. Grelk's threats overcome the terror caused by the rain of arrows, and the goblin soldiers on the bridge raise their shields and let bloodlust overcome their nerves, steady once again. Baridoc calls on his Oathsworn to charge the bridge, activating 3 dice and 4s. He succeeds with an 8, and he and the Oathsworn will move 5 inches towards the bridge, and then 1 1/4 onto it, as it is difficult terrain. Bruss and his spear goblins attempt to overcome the pains in their bellies and activate 3 dice needing 8s. They succeed with a 10. They will move forward 6 inches in agony, and then they will go sideways 1 1/2. Edmund the Ox and his lads are the next to activate. 2 dice needing 5s. They succeed with a 9. And they're going to be sticking close to Thazzik in order to block line of sight and hopefully prevent him from being fireballed. So they're just going to move forward a smidge and then move sideways. The last goblin unit to activate will be the Ogre Linebreakers. 3 dice needing 7s. They fail their activation, but that's okay, because at the moment they just want to move sideways 3 inches. Here we are at the end of turn 2. The dwarves have made it to the river and will now begin to push across. Casualties from their archers are starting to mount on the goblin side, though Thazzik is having to duck from cover because of Char's superior position up on the hill. Turn 3 starts with initiative. It goes to the goblins with an 8. Char will be the first to activate on the goblin side. 3 dice, needing 6s. He succeeds with a 9. He can no longer draw line of sight to Thazzik. Thazzik is well and truly hidden. So instead we shall be launching a fireball into the Goldenfield bowman. Char will need 7s on 2 dice to cast the fireball. He only gets a 3, so it's not going to be going off this turn. Let's begin the dwarf turn by activating Thazzik. 2 dice needing 4s. He fails once again with 2s, so he's too busy cowering. Alright, he's just going to stay there. Come on, Thazzik. The Goblin Arches will now activate. They are within 6 inches of Bruss, so they'll receive 3 dice, needing 6s. They succeed with a 9. And once again, they will be shooting at their closest target, the Spears of South Pass. So they'll receive 4 dice because the Dwarf Spears have shields. They are shoot 1, +1 for extra rank, shoot 2 on defense 10, so they'll need 8s. There is a 9 there. So 1 more dwarf goes down. And the dwarves must now make a morale check. 2 dice, they are -1 for having a casualty, but +1 for it being a shooting attack, and +1 for having more than 2 ranks. So they will need 3 on 2 dice. And they succeed with a 9. They're not phased. On the dwarf turn, we'll activate Baridoc Kingston. 3 dice requiring 4s. He succeeds with a 9. And he'll be using his command ability to also activate the Stout Hearts, who are just within 6 inches. So they'll need 3 dice, needing 4s. They also successfully activate with a 9. Let's start with Baridoc and the Hammerheart Oathsworn, who will be using their first move to move into combat with those Goblin soldiers. The Goblin soldiers will be shielding, so the Dwarves will get 4 dice. They are Fight 2, plus 2 for having extra ranks, Fight 4 on Defense 9, including the Champion dice, so they will need 5s. We have 1 10 there, so that was enough to cause 2 casualties. It was a pretty abysmal roll. And the Goblins will fight back. They receive 4 dice because they shielded. They are Fight 1 against Defense 10, so they will require 9s. Nothing there, so the Dwarves definitely won that fight. The Goblins are required to make a morale check. They receive -2 for casualties, an additional -1 for being less than a full rank. So -3, they'll get 3 dice because Grolk is within range, and they will need 9s. They succeed with a 9, and Baridoc is going to force them back 6 inches. In order to move the Goblins back 6 inches, we will have to move Grolk and his bodyguard out of the way as well. The difficult terrain doesn't slow you when you're pushed back, so they will be going the full distance. So let's begin by moving Grolk directly back until he is 6 inches away from the soldiers in front of him, and then we can move the soldiers back to the correct position. Too easy. I was hoping for the old 1-2 punch on a disordered unit, but it is not to be. So now the Stouthearts will be shooting at that unit of Goblin soldiers. They can see them beyond the bridge now, because they can see up to half the unit here, and they won't get the defensive bonus of being in contact with a bridge, because they're not in contact with it. So they'll get 4 dice because the Goblin soldiers have shield. They'll shoot 3 because of the extra rank on defense 9, so they'll require 6s. We have 2 10s there, so that's 2 casualties. Take those 2 that they could see. And the Goblins must now make a morale check. They will get 3 dice because Grolk is there. -2 for casualties. -3 because they're less than a full rank, but +1 for a shooting attack. So -2, they're going to require 8s. And they succeed with a 9. Those Goblins are not going anywhere. Grolk has put the fear into them. On to the Goblin's turn, and we shall activate Stirred and his soldiers. They'll get 3 dice, requiring 6s. He succeeds with a 6. And they simply want to hold this bank. So they will be moving 3 inches across to better cover that forward. On the Dwarf and Human turn, we'll be activating the Goldenfield Bowmen. 2 dice, needing 5s. They succeed with a 5. And they'll be shooting their closest target, which is now Stirred and his fellows on the other side of the ford. They receive 4 dice because the Goblin soldiers have shields. They are shoot 3 with an extra rank on defense 9, so they'll require 6s. We have 1 casualty there, and the Goblins will be required to make a morale check. They'll get 3 dice. They are -1 for a casualty, but +1 for a shooting attack, so they will require 6s. And they succeed with an 8. These Goblins are rock solid now. On the Goblin turn, we'll attempt to activate Bruss and his Goblin Spearmen. 3 dice, needing 8s because of that bad food. They succeed with the 10, so they can hold their stomachs long enough to wheel on the front corner here. Just like so. And then they're going to move up to 3 inches sideways. On the Dwarves' turn, it's the Spears of South Pass. 2 dice, needing 4s. They succeed with a 9. And they'll be moving into the ford. They're not going to get very far, but we may as well start it. So they'll be going 2.5 inches to begin with, because the ford is difficult terrain. followed by a further 1 1/4 as their second move. On the Goblin's turn, Grelk is just going to pass. Edmund the Ox will attempt to activate on the Dwarf and Human turn. 2 dice, then 5s. He succeeds with a 9. And Thazik's useless, so we're going to leave him for now. And we're going to move forward 6 inches, followed by wheeling as our second action. The final Goblin unit are the Ogre Linebreakers, who will also be passing. Here we are at the end of turn 3. The Dwarves are making their way across the river. Casualties are starting to mount on both sides, and Char has put the fear of Fireball into Thazik. Turn 4 begins as ever with an initiative roll. We have a 10 going to the Dwarves, but a double 5 from the Goblins. So a double 5 means the Goblins have uncovered an ancient Oathmark. We get to place that within 6 inches of any one of their units, and any of their units within 6 inches of it receive a +1 to their morale score. Let's put it here on the Goblin right flank, where it's going to affect all 3 of these units, and shore up that side of the battlefield. We shall start the Dwarf turn, as is tradition, by trying to activate Thazik. 2 dice, then 4s. And hooray, he succeeds. And on Thazik's turn, he is going to advance, move 5 inches, which will get him to within 3 inches of Edmund's lads, so he can use the Fire Overrule to draw a line of sight to the Hammerheart Oathsworn and attempt to cast Stoneheart on them. So, 2 dice, we need 8s. Come on, Thazik. Nope, never mind. On the Goblin turn, we're going to activate Stirred and his soldiers. They get 3 dice, needing 6s. They succeed with an 8. And Stirred's going to encourage his mate, and they're going to leap into the river and tie up those Spears of South Pass. Stirred is going to choose to fight alone. He'll get 3 dice, including the champion dice. He is fight 3. He does not get his charge bonus because the spears have brace. So fight 3 on defense 10 means he'll require 7s. We have 1, 2, 3 casualties there, double from the champion dice. And the Spears of South Pass will fight back. They receive 5 dice, including the champion dice. They are fight 2, plus 2 for having extra ranks, fight 4 on defense 9, so they will require 5s. And they have 1, 2, 3, and 4 hits there. So 4 of the Goblins go down. And they're required to make both sides are required to make a morale check. The Goblins are no longer within 6 inches of their Oathmark. So let's start by checking the Dwarves Morale. They receive -3 for casualties, but +1 for having more than 2 ranks. So they'll need 6s on 2 dice. They become disordered. And the Goblins need to check. They'll get 3 dice, because Stirred is within range of Bruss. They receive -4 for casualties, -5 for having less than a full rank. So they're going to need 10s. They also fail, so they also become disordered. Because the Dwarves won, they're going to choose to force the Goblins back, and they're going to force them back 6 inches. And both units count as having activated. For the Dwarves and Humans, we will activate the Goldenfield Bowmen. 2 dice, dealing 5s. They succeed with a 10. And they are going to try and hit that disordered unit of Goblins. So they're going to start by moving forward 6 inches in order to be able to draw a line of sight. And then they can draw a line of sight past the Spears of South Pass and hit the disordered unit. So they'll receive 4 dice on the attack, because the goblins have shields. They are shoot 2, +1 for extra ranks, but -1 for having moved. So shoot 2 on defense 9, they'll require 7s. We have 1, 2, 3 there. That's disappointing, but there we go. That's killed all of those. But there is no need to make a check for Cascading Panic because they were all wiped out. The goblins will be activating the Goblin Arches. They are within range of Bruss, so they will receive 3 dice for their activation, requiring 6s. They succeed with a 10, and they'll be shooting at their closest target, the disordered South Pass Spears. So they get 4 dice because the Spears have shields. They are shoot 2 because of the extra rank on defense 10, so they'll require 8s. We have 1, 2 casualties there. The dwarves must now make a morale check. They are at -2 for casualties, -3 for being disordered, but +2 for having more than 2 ranks and it being a shooting attack. So they require 5s on 2 dice. And thankfully they succeed with a 5. The Stout Hearts will be next. 2 dice, needing 4s. They fail their activation, but that's alright. They can still shoot at their closest target, which is going to be Grelk and his goblin soldiers. They will receive 4 dice because the goblin soldiers have shields. They are shoot 2, +1 for a rank, -1 for failing to activate. So shoot 2 on defense 9, they will require 7s. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Well done, Stout Hearts. Grelk will now be required to make a morale check. He'll receive 3 dice. -4 for the casualties, +1 for it being a shooting attack, +1 for more than 2 ranks, and +1 for having courage. So a straight roll needing 6s. And he succeeds with an 8. On the goblin's turn, we shall attempt to hammer the South Pass Spears again. We'll be activating Bruss and his spears. 3 dice, needing 8s because of that bad food. Roll that in the tray, not that it matters, we've got a 10. So they successfully activate. Part of their movement will be through difficult terrain, though because they are within 4 inches of the target, and their movement through difficult terrain would normally be 4.5, they will have plenty of movement to make it into contact. So they're going to charge into the front of the Spears of South Pass. Oh dear. The dwarves will shield, so the goblins will get 4 dice. They won't get their charge bonus because they're charged into Spears with Brace. So they are fight 1, +3 for ranks. Fight 4, on defense 10, they'll require 6s. That was appalling, and very, very lucky. Alright, the dwarves will fight back. They receive 4 dice because they shielded, including the champion dice because Forgrin is there. So they are fight 2, +1 for having an extra rank, but -1 for having already activated, and -1 for being disordered. They are fight 1 against defense 9, so they will require 8s. Wow, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4 casualties there. God, you were lucky. And they won that fight. So the goblins will need to make a morale check. They'll get 3 dice. They'll get +1 for being within range of the Oathmark that they discovered. So -4 for casualties, +1 for having more than 2 ranks, +1 for the Oathstone means they'll be at -2. They're already at -2 for having bad food, so they're going to need 10s. A 9 unfortunately is not going to do it, so those goblins become disordered. And the dwarves are going to choose to push them back 6 inches. Woman, heck, that was lucky. Back to the dwarves, and we'll be activating Baridoc Kingston and the Hammerheart Oathsworn. 3 dice, needing 4s. They'll succeed with 8s and 9. And they'll be moving across the bridge at half speed. So they're not going to get very far. So they can go 3 3/4 of an inch. So they're going to get to about there with 2 actions. Progress is progress, I guess. On the Goblin's turn, we've got a couple of Goblins that are going to be in the way. So let's see if we can kill them off. They'll get 3 dice to activate because they're right in front of Grark, needing 6s. They succeed with a 10. And they are going to be charging straight ahead and straight into the Hammerheart Oathsworn. Baridoc Kingston's going to fight alone in an effort to ruin the Goblin's plan and hopefully not kill all of these guys, meaning that there's still going to be Goblins in the way of their other units. We'll see how that goes. The Goblins are fight 1 against Baridoc's defense of 11, so they will require 10s on 2 dice. There is 1 10 there, so they cause 1 casualty. Baridoc fights back. He is fight 3 with 2 combat dice, including the champion dice. So fight 3 on defense 9 means he requires 6s. And he wipes them out. No, he doesn't. He requires 7s because he has already activated this turn. So he is fight 2 on defense 9. So he kills one of them. Both sides must now make morale checks. So let's start with Baridoc Kingston. He is with 3 dice at -1 for the casualty, but +1 for having more than 2 ranks. So he's going to require 4s. He succeeds with an 8. And the Goblin will also have to check, that one lone Goblin. So he gets 3 dice because he is right in front of Grelk. He is at -1 for casualties and a further -1 for being less than a full rank. So -2, he requires 8s. And he succeeds with a 10. Wow. Grelk really did put the fear in these guys. They're not going anywhere. Except 1 inch back because the combat was drawn. Which somewhat ruins the rest of the Goblin's turn because they cannot charge through a friendly unit. Back to the Human and Goblin turn. The last unit to activate will be Edmund the Ox and Edmund's Lads. They are within 6 inches of Baridoc Kingston, so they'll get 3 dice to activate, requiring 5s. They succeed with an 8. Their first action will be to wheel to line up on the bridge, and then they will be moving forward as their second action. So they'll get 1 inch clear, and then they'll be able to go 2.5 in difficult terrain. The only remaining units are Goblin units. So both Grelk and the Ogres will be passing because they can't do a whole lot with that one lone Goblin in the way. Char will attempt to activate. He will receive 3 dice for being in range of Grelk. Needing 6s, he succeeds with a 9. And he'll be casting Fireball at the Spears of South Pass because they are disordered. So he's going to pivot to C and then attempt to cast the spell. So 2 dice. He will require 7s. He does not successfully cast the spell. Here we are at the end of turn 4. The Dwarves are making progress crossing the river. The Goblins are starting to take quite heavy casualties on their larger units, which they do not want. Let's start turn 5 with an initiative roll. Let's go into the Dwarves with a 10. It won't come as much of a surprise. We'll be starting by activating the Spears of South Pass and Foregrin Shield Splitter to try and remove that disordered token. So 2 dice, they'll need 5s because they're disordered. They fail. Brilliant. So they can only take a simple action and they remain disordered. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to continue to push forward onto the opposite bank, moving a mighty 2.5 inches through the difficult terrain. Goblin's up next, and we're going to try and activate Brust to remove that disordered token. He'll get 3 dice. Unfortunately, he's going to need 9s because of the bad food and the disordered token. Put him at -3. So they're in a really bad way. Well, we'll see if we can keep them on the battlefield because that's what the Goblins need right now. A 10, success. They are no longer disordered. And they can take a simple action, which is just going to be to advance to an inch away from the Spears of South Pass in order to prevent them from coming on too much further. On the human and dwarf turn, we'll activate the Goldenfield Bowmen first. 2 dice, needing 5s. They succeed with 9s, and they'll be shooting at their closest target, which is Grelk and his bodyguard. They are shoot 3 because of the extra rank, and they're shooting into the flank of Grelk's unit, not that that makes a difference. So they'll receive 4 dice because the goblins have shields. Shoot 3 against defense 9 means they'll require 6s. We have 1, 2, 3 there. So Grelk and his bodyguard require a morale check, 3 dice. They're at -3 for casualties, but +3 because they have more than 2 ranks. They have courage, and it was a shooting attack, so they'll require 6s on 3 dice. And they succeed with a 9. On the Goblin turn, we'll be activating the Goblin Arches. 3 dice for being in range of Bruss. They'll need 6s. They succeed with a 7, and they'll be shooting at their closest target, the South Pass Spears. They have the fire overall, so they're able to loose their arrows over, and they're higher anyway. So they'll receive 4 dice because the dwarves have shields. They are shoot 2 because of the extra rank against defense 10, so they'll require 8s. We have 1 10 there, so 1 more dwarf goes down. And the dwarves will need to make a morale check. They have 2 dice. They receive -1 for a casualty, -1 for being disordered, but +2 from having ranks and it being a shooting attack. So they'll require 4s on 2 dice. And they succeed with a 10. Those guys are very tenacious. Back to the dwarves and humans, and we'll activate the Stout Hearts. 2 dice requiring 4s. They succeed with a 9, and they'll be shooting at their closest target, Grelk and his bodyguard. So, firing over the top here, they'll receive 4 dice because the goblins have shields. They are shoot 3 because of an extra rank on defense 9, so they'll require 6s. We have 1, 2, 3 casualties there. Good. Alright, and the goblins will need to make a morale check. They received 3 dice because Grelk is leading the unit, -3 for casualties, but +3 because it's a shooting attack. They have at least 2 ranks, and they have had courage cast on them, so 6s. They successfully pass with an 8. On the Goblin turn, we're going to activate this brave little fellow, who I'm sure deserves a promotion. 3 dice, needing 6s. He succeeds with an 8. And he is going to be holding that bridge alone against the Hammerheart Oathsworn. So he's going to charge in there. He's going to get 1 dice to attack with. He is fight 1 on defense 10, so he's going to require 9s. Baridoc is going to take this alone, I think. So it'll be fight 1 against defense 11, so he will require 10s. He does not succeed, and Baridoc will strike back. He gets 2 dice. He is fight 2. Correction, he is fight 3 with 2 combat dice. So fight 3 against defense 9 means he requires 6s. And that poor bastard is cut down. But the Hammerheart Oathsworn count has been activated, so they're not going to be going anywhere else this turn. Desik will use that brave goblin sacrifice to pivot. And then he's going to attempt to activate. 2 dice needing 4s. He succeeds with 4s. And he will be moving forward 5 inches. And he will then cast Stoneheart onto Edmund's lads. 2 dice needing 8s. He does not succeed. Back to the goblins, where we shall attempt to activate the ogres. 3 dice for being next to Grelk. They need 7s. They succeed with a 7. They will be wheeling on the front corner there. Something like that. And they'll be moving 6 inches forward. That'll get us 4 there, and then 1 inch through difficult terrain will allow them to charge into the front of Baridoc Kingston and the Hammerheart Oathsworn. Now is the time for Baridoc to use his heroic trait, Shield Wall, which will increase the defence of the Hammerheart Oathsworn to 12. And they will shield because, well, ogres. The ogres will get 4 dice, including the champion dice. They are fight 4. They do not get their charge bonus because the Hammerheart Oathsworn have had brace cast upon them. So fight 4 versus defense 12, they will need 8s. We have 1-2 there. The Hammerheart Oathsworn will fight back. They receive 4 dice, including the champion dice, because they shielded. They are fight 2, plus 1 for having extra rank, fight 3, but minus 1 for having already activated. So fight 2 on defense of 11, they will need 9s. Nothing there. The ogres definitely won that. So the dwarves will have to make a morale check. They'll get 3 dice because Baridoc is there. Minus 2 for casualties. Plus 1 for having at least 2 ranks. So they will need 5s on 3 dice. They successfully passed their morale check. So pushing the Hammerheart Oathsworn back is going to get messy. Thazak will have to go back. Edmund's lads will have to go back. And then the Hammerheart Oathsworn go back. Well, that buggers the plan up a little bit, doesn't it? The last unit on the Dwarves and Human site to activate will be Edmund the Ox and Edmund's lads. 3 dice, needing 5s. They succeed with a 6. And they will be attempting to make some headway against this bridge. So with a movement of 6, the first 3.5 inches will be normal. The next 2.5 will be reduced to 1 1/4, which will get them here in line with the riverbank. And then their second action will be to move a further 1.5 inches. So they'll get to about here. With only goblin units left, Grelk will attempt to activate. 3 dice requiring 6s. He fails his activation, but that's fine because all he wants to do is do a single, simple move action, 3 inches sideways. So hopefully he doesn't get shot quite so much. And then the last model to activate will be Char. 2 dice, needing 6s. He succeeds with an 8, and he'll be casting Fireball into the Spears of South Pass, who are still disordered. He needs 7s to successfully cast the spell. He gets a 9, he does. He'll get 2 dice, because the dwarves have shields. It is shoot 4 against defense 10, so he will require 6s. 1 casualty there. So a morale check from the Spears of South Pass. They'll get 2 dice. They receive -1 for casualties, but +1 because it was a shooting attack, and -1 for being disordered, so they will need 5s on 2 dice. They succeed with a 6. Here we are at the end of turn 5. Casualties are mounting up on both sides, but so far the goblins have managed to hold the dwarves at bay, for the most part. Initiative for turn 6 is going to go to the dwarves with a 10. Let's try to keep those Spears of South Pass alive. They are currently our only hope. 2 dice, they'll need 5 to successfully activate. Yes, they succeed on a 10. But they can only take a simple action. Let's use our simple action to move sideways. We are in difficult terrain, so we'll go 1 1/4 inches. It's not going to be enough, but it's a start. On the goblins' turn, we'll be activating the ogres. They'll get 3 dice, needing 7s. They succeed with an 8. And they will be moving at half speed because the bridge is narrow. 4.5 inches forward, which is going to allow them to move straight into Edmund's lads. This will hurt. The ogres are fight 4, +1 for charging, fight 5.
Squash you.
Edmund's lads will shield, so they'll get 4 dice. Fight 5 against defense 9 means they'll require 4s. 1, 2, 3. That was definitely a lot better than it could have been. The humans will strike back. They'll receive 4 dice, including the champion dice. They are fight 2, +1 for an extra rank, fight 3 on defense 11, so they will require 8s. We have 1, 2 there. That's enough to cause 2 wounds on the ogres. The humans will be required to make a morale check. They'll get 3 dice because Baridoc is right there. They'll receive -3 for casualties, so they'll need 8s. At this stage, Edmund is going to use his special ability, his heroic trait, Stand Your Ground, to automatically pass the morale check. The ogres will still force them back, and they're going to force them back 6 inches. So once again, we have a massive pile up. And both units count as been activated. On the dwarves and humans turn, we will activate the Goldenfield bowmen. 2 dice needing 5s. They succeed with an 8. And they'll be shooting at their closest target, which are the archers on the hill. They cannot draw a line of sight to the goblin spearmen there because the front is blocked by the South Pass spears. Grelk is no longer the closest target, and the ogres are out of the line of sight. So, shooting at those archers, we'll get 5 dice, because they have no form of shielding. We are shoot 3 because of our extra rank. Shoot 3 against defense 9 means we require 6s. There is 1 there, 1 7. So 1 of the archers goes down, and they are forced to make a morale check. -1 for casualties, +1 for it being a shooting attack, and +1 for the Oathstone being there. They get 3 dice because they're in range of Bruss, so they'll need 5s. They succeed with a 7. And as their second action, they're going to move sideways 3 inches. On the Goblin turn, we will attempt to activate Bruss and his Goblin Spears. 3 dice requiring 8 because they still have stomachache from that bad food. They fail their activation on a 6, so they may only take a simple action. There's not a lot they want to do, they're just going to stay there and hold that forward. Back to the dwarves, and we'll activate the Stout Hearts. They get 3 dice now because Baridoc is right next to them, needing 4s. They succeed with a 4, that was a close run thing. And if they shoot at their closest target, they will be shooting at the ogres. They are shoot 3 because they have an extra rank. The ogres are defense 11, and I'm going to give them cover. So shoot 2 on defense 11, fire 9s. They do get 5 dice because the ogres do not have shields. We have 2 there, a 9 and a 10. So that's enough to remove 1 model and cause 1 wound on another. And the ogres will have to make a morale check. They receive -1 for the casualty, -1 for being less than a full rank, +1 because it's a shooting attack, and +2 because they have courage 2. They'll only get 2 dice because they're not in range of Grelk. So they'll be making this check needing 5s on 2 dice. They succeed with an 8. On the Goblin turn, we'll attempt to activate Char. 2 dice needing 6s. He fails his activation, so he's just going to chill out there. Things are going well, he thinks. He'd be right. Fezzik will react to that display of haughtiness by pivoting on the spot. Face that direction. And then he will activate 3 dice, needing 4s. He succeeds with a 10. And he will be moving forward past the archers there as far as he needs to go, so that he can now draw a line of sight on the Spears of South Pass. He'll then be using 2 dice to attempt to cast Stoneheart on them. 2 dice needing 8s. No luck, only a 6. Next up on the Goblin side will be the Goblin Arches. They'll get 3 dice to activate, needing 6s. They fail their activation, just getting a 4. So they'll be shooting at the closest target over the Goblin Spears here and into the Spears of South Pass. They'll get 4 dice because the Dwarves have shields. They'll shoot 1 on defense 10, so they will require 9s. We have a single 10 there, so 1 more Dwarf goes down, and the Dwarves will need to make a morale check. They'll be making that at -1 for the casualty, +1 for it being a shooting attack, so they'll need 4s on 2 dice, which they succeed with a 10. The final Dwarf unit to activate will be Baridoc Kingston and the Hammerheart Oathsworn. 3 dice, needing 4s. He succeeds with a 7. And he will be using his first action to move forward 5 inches. And then his second to move forward, so about half an inch there, and then 2 inches halved to 1 will get him to about there. Balance precariously. The last Goblin unit to activate will be Grelk. 3 dice, needing 6s. He succeeds with a 10. And he is just going to wheel. He's just going to advance and hold that bridge, because they don't have long to hold now. Here is the table at the end of turn 6. Things are looking very desperate for the Dwarves and Humans. I don't think they're going to be able to make it. They're going to run out of time. The Ogres up on that flank absolutely hammered us. Such is life. We'll see what happens on this other flank. Initiative on turn 7 will go to the Goblins with a 10. The most desperate side for the Goblins, and let's be honest, neither side's particularly desperate, is their right flank. So we'll activate Bruss and his unit of spears, 3 dice, needing 8s because of that bad food. They succeed with an 8, and they'll be charging straight into the Spears of South Pass.
Put a maggot hole in his belly.
Who will be shielding. So the Goblins will get 4 dice. They are fight 1, they don't get their charge, but they do get +2 from extra rank. So fight 3 on defense 10, they will require 7s. We have 2 10s there, so that'll take down 2 more Dwarves. The Dwarves will fight back, they'll get 4 dice, including the champion dice. They are fight 2 on defense 9, so they will require 7s. We have 1 2 from Forgrim Shield Splitter there, so that's 2 Goblins down. So the combat is a draw. Both sides are now required to make morale checks. The Dwarves will do so first with 2 dice. They are -2 for casualties, so they will need 6s. They succeed with 10s. The Goblins will get 3 dice. They are -2 for casualties, +2 from having at least 2 ranks and being within range of the Oathmark that they discovered, but -2 from the bad food, so they'll need 8s. They succeed with a 10, and both sides are pushed back by 1 inch because of the drawn combat. Things are getting desperate, and it's going to need perfect dice rolls for this to work out for the Dwarves and Humans. So let's start by activating the Stout Hearts. They are within 6 inches of Baridoc, so they will receive 3 dice, needing 4s. They succeed with an 8. They are going to wheel on the front corner there. Let's try that in order to be in range of those archers. I don't think this is going to work. The Stout Heart's closest target are now the Goblin Spearmen. They're closer than the archers. So we'll make a shooting attack against those Goblin Spearmen. and we'll see if we can sort them out. So we will get 4 dice. We are shoot 3 because of the extra rank, but -1 because we moved. So shoot 2 on defense 9 means we require 7s. 1. That's right, that might be enough. The goblins will now have to make a morale check. They'll get 3 dice because Russ is in the unit. -3 for the casualty and the bad food. +3 from it being a shooting attack, having 2 full ranks, and being within range of the Oathmark. Makes it a straight roll, needing 6s. And they get it with a 10. This, I think, is game over. The goblins will activate the ogres, 3 dice, because they are in range of Grelk, needing 7s. They succeed with a 7, and they will be charging directly ahead into Baridoc Kingston. Baridoc Kingston will be shielding. They are fight 4 with 4 dice, including the champion dice. They do not get their charge bonus because Baridoc Kingston has had brace cast on them. So fight 4 against defense 10, they will require 6s. 1, 2, 3 casualties there. The dwarves will then fight back. They will receive 4 dice, including the champion dice. They are fight 2, +1 for having an extra rank, so fight 3 on defense 11, they will require 8s. We have 2 wounds there from Baridoc, so that's enough to kill another ogre. The ogres have well and truly won that fight. On to morale checks. So the Hammerheart Oathsworn will get 3 dice. They'll be at -3 for their casualties, so they will require 7s. That's a failure, so they become disordered. And the ogres will also have to make a check. They will receive 3 dice because they are within range of Grelk. -1 for the casualty. -1 for being less than a full rank. But +2 for having courage 2 means that the ogre will require 7s. And they succeed with a 7. The Hammerheart Oathsworn are pushed back 6 inches, which also pushes back Edmund's lads. Bugger. With that, halfway through the 7th turn, the dwarves and humans will concede. With 1 turn remaining, there's simply not enough time to get enough troops across the river to contest it, with the sheer number of goblins remaining. So, victory will go to Grelk and his goblins, and Ogre, whose successful rearguard action has allowed the rest of the tribe to break camp and escape.
Grelk, 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 Grelk.
So well done, Grelk and his buddies. Those goblins refused to move. They failed, 2, maybe 3 morale checks the whole game. They were ridiculously tenacious. Loved it. The choice of targets for applying bad food to was something that was really make or break, I think. I put it on those goblins on the left-hand flank, hoping that the Spears of South Pass would be able to smash through them with that -2 to their morale and activation. But they just kept passing those morale checks and those activation checks. There was nothing stopping those goblins. The other choice was going to be to put it on the ogres, which at the end of the day probably would have worked out better, but alas, that's the way that the cookie crumbles. So never mind. Other than that, everything went pretty well as you'd expect it to. Those ogres hurt when they hit things, and I already miss Avhilda. So unfortunately, the dwarves and the humans of Goldenfields weren't able to deliver a solid punch to the Black Stone tribe. So unfortunately, they are going to continue to be a thorn in the side of the civilized lands. We'll see what they get up to in the future. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me for this game. I do hope that you have enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought down below. Like, subscribe, all of that good stuff that YouTubers are supposed to say. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.
gnawing and hacking at the foundations that make up the world, tearing through roots, disrupting ley lines, altering nature itself to power their machines. In their ignorance, they disrupt the balance, twisting the world's magics, leaving barren wasteland where ancient woodlands once were. Goblins are a momentary inconvenience, greedy and base, roaming the land as herds, grazing, then passing on. Humanity are fractured and divided. Their settlements are insignificant, born one minute to fade away the next. But dwarves scar the landscape with their infestation, digging ever deeper in their lust for riches. Filthy creatures.